Hello, this is Helen Griffin from the Golden Apple webpage, and I'm talking today about some questions that have come up recently on Ravelry about making cast-ons in ribbing. And actually, let me put this over to this side because this side is nicer. I think this side is the correct side. Doing cast-ons on ribbing, and there's our rib. You can see each side, it looks like a knit when it's condensed. Doing cast-ons on ribbing, there's a number of methods, and while this is the first video I'm making, it's really not the first way I would do a cast-on in ribbing. This is a more advanced way. What this process is it uses two different variations of long tail. It uses the Austrian long tail cast-on, which results in twisted stitches right from the beginning, and it uses a Chinese variation of long tail, which results in knits and purls, a little bit easier than some other methods, which also looks like somewhat like a tubular cast-on. You'll notice in this swatch there's actually some unevenness in the ribbing, and that's because I tend to be a combo knitter, and I like for my demonstrations, when I can, to remember to do a standard purl rather than a combo purl, because it makes it easier for some people. So let's see how we do this cast on. Now, there are two things you need to know to start with. One, this is not a demo to teach you how to do a long tail cast on. I presume you know how to do a long tail cast on, and this is going to be worked way too fast for you to learn from. So get a long tail cast on. I have videos for that, and master that. The second thing is I'm going to talk about the idea of a long tail cast on consisting of two parts. The two parts are the first stitch, and let me demonstrate what I mean. Let's see, make sure I have a tail here. The tail is here. A standard long tail cast on consists of two parts. The first part is a standard simple loop that you make on your thumb, which is a simple cast on, and then you pick up a stitch and you actually knit a row. I like to call that row 0, because it doesn't count in your count of rows for your pattern. One of the problems most people dislike about a long tail cast on is because this row 0 makes a knit stitch on the front, it makes a purl on the back, and if your row 1 of your pattern calls for a knit stitch, it can change the look in a way you don't like. Okay, so we're going to do some things. I'm going to refer to this row 0 and how it looks. So now that we've done our slip stitch, what we're going to do is go under the thumb yarn, just the plain thumb yarn at the bridge, and then pick up an index finger yarn. And this I like to call a half stitch, because it's really a half stitch originating out of nothing. So almost like a yarn over as the base. And then we're going to do an Austrian cast on. An Austrian cast on is very similar to a standard long tail. You go into the thumb stitch just as you normally would, but instead of picking up this front knit yarn from the index, you pick up the back yarn, and the result is, there it is, clear as a bell. Do you see that X right there? We have an X or twist in our stitch, and that X or twist is actually in the row 0, not in the cast on. Our Norwegian long tail puts the twist in the cast on stitch, not in row 0. The Austrian cast on puts the twist in row 0. We follow this by another half stitch. We follow this by another Austrian stitch, and then repeat a half stitch, an Austrian long tail cast on stitch, and as you snug them up, be very careful not to snug them up too much. Some people like to space them out. I just have learned not to snug them so much. Then we do a half stitch, and we do an Austrian twisted stitch, and we do a half stitch, and we do an Austrian twisted stitch. Because we're doing, let's get that clearer, because we're doing this Austrian twisted stitch in row 0, we're going to have twisted stitches right from the very beginning of our knitting. And that's what we're looking for, isn't it? To do a cast on that's a knit and purl, and that's what we're accomplishing by the half stitches, and ribbing that's done in a twisted stitch right from the very first row. And a half stitch, oops, and a twisted stitch, and a half stitch and a twisted stitch. So these two stitches are simply alternated. If you forget, you can go back to the Chinese cast on or the Austrian cast on, separate videos in and of their own. Okay, we did that. We do a half stitch, and then we're going to do our last pair now of stitches. A half followed by a twisted row 0 stitch. So now, because this cast on is not the same two stitches, you are always going to have to end with a standard or the long tail stitch. The half stitch will unravel. You can see now already in this cast on these loops that come up from the base and go over, and that's what we've created here, these oversized loops that I do not think are as attractive as the other side. But again, that's my opinion. You can decide for yourself. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start working our ribbing. Our first ribbing on the right side is going to be a purl followed by a knit, and I'm going to show you how to do them. We're going to do a twisted stitch, so we're coming in from the back side of the loop and purling. Our half stitch isn't twisted, but we have the opportunity right now to twist it, and since it was really only a half stitch, it's fine. So a twisted purl followed by a twisted knit followed by a twisted purl followed by a twisted knit followed by a twisted purl followed by a twisted knit followed by a twisted purl followed by a twisted knit. So this is definitely one that you can only use for 1x1 ribbing. You cannot make 2 half stitches in a row, so this really only works for 1x1 twisted ribbing. A twisted purl and a twisted knit and a twisted purl and a twisted knit and a twisted purl and a twisted knit. I'm going to move these out of the way. And a twisted purl and a twisted knit and a twisted purl and a twisted knit and a twisted purl. So there's row 1 done of our knit and purl cast on. And this bulky yarn, it does look slightly different than it looks in this finer yarn, but after a few rows those picots will show a little better, and that rounded edge that I think makes this cast on so attractive will become more prominent just by doing this combination of 2 different methods of casting on. You get twisted stitches from row 1, you get ribbing from row 1 or row 0. You get twisted stitches and ribbing from row 0. Right from the very beginning you can have twisted stitches and ribbing, and it looks very, very attractive. So if you'd like to try this, you can. You can also look forward to a number of other variations on how to do knit and purl ribbing. This one is probably number 5 in this series, as they're going to be counted with simpler ones first, but this is the one I'm doing now. So I hope you enjoy this little tutorial on how to combine different kinds of cast-on methods to create rib stitches right from the beginning, and or twisted stitches right from the beginning. Goodbye.